Hey, welcome to MVP's All Things Considered, where we talk about, well, everything the paranormal encompasses. So, you ready? All right, then, let's do this. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsor, Yup Gear. Is that Yup Gear? Yup.
Coffee. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of MVP's All Things Considered. This season has been all about the controversial topic of UFOs. This is episode 6, where we will be discussing Mr. Bob Lazar. I'm Evan, and I'm here with Mel, Joe, and Paul. Let's get into it. So, a lot to unpack on this one.
Dude, you guys have no idea how much research I've been doing on this topic, on this person, since I saw his Netflix documentary, and I use that term loosely. So what do we know about Bob Lazar and his claims so far, Evan?
Well,
Go for it, Paul. You know better than I do.
in
Yeah.
short, it's just a man who was allegedly recruited into a program back in engineering UFO technology that had been recovered. I mean, that's the short of it.
To make a really long story short, yeah, that's pretty much it. But
Yeah.
he started out, when he was very young, in his very early 20s, maybe even his teenage years, he somehow strapped a jet engine rocket to the back of his Honda and was driving around town like that. Got featured in the newspaper. Some people took note of it, and then I honestly think what you were mentioning about earlier, Paul. I think that they were probably just desperate at this point. They
Yeah.
were wanting somebody that was just out of the box to come in and work on it that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. It's kind of how I looked at it.
I don't think he ever worked there.
I don't know. I don't know whether he ever worked there or not. But allegedly, he got pulled into this top secret government program on Area 51, working at some offsite of Area 51 called S4, which turned out to be a real place. And they were backwards engineering UFO technology, and he was working in their what was it, the Energy and Propulsion Department or something like that?
At EG&G.
Yeah, at EG&G,
Yeah.
exactly. This is all what he claims, and
Yeah. I want to say he also had a check stub from the United States Navy.
Oh, you want to talk about that?
I mean, you can bring it up. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just saying it's a facet.
So, Mel, or before we get into that, do you even think that he worked at Los Alamos before EG&G? Because there is controversy about that as well, but they do say that there are actual records of him at Los Alamos.
I do think he worked at Los Alamos. I do not think that he worked there as a physicist.
Okay.
And the reason why is, okay, so yes, his name is listed in the Los Alamos phone book, but by his name, there's this thing, 2 letters, K/M. K/M stands for Kirk Meyer. That was a subcontractor for Los Alamos. So there was a difference between the people who worked at the lab and the people who worked for the lab. Now, the people who worked at the lab, for example, Kirk Meyer, they're still listed in the phone book, but they have to have that designation, K/M. If he worked at Kirk Meyer, that would make sense because, you could be support staff, admin, whatever.
A janitor for
or even a mechanic. He was really good, and I don't think that this man's not smart. I think this man knows enough.
Anybody who can put a jet engine on the back of your Honda and drive it around is, you got something going on.
Oh, you want to talk about that thing? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the paper.
Yeah, it was in the paper. But what he said in the paper about the jet in his car, he said it produced 1,600 pounds of thrust, and it was the largest engine that was designed by Gluharef, which is the engine that he said he was using. It was the G8-2-700. At the time, the largest one they had produced only 700 pounds of thrust, and it was huge. And I've seen pictures of it. Plus, per that company's own technical documentation, the G8-2-700, it actually wasn't designed until 1984, 2 years after Lazar arrived in Los Alamos. So the car photos that were in the Monitor article, it showed an engine that was roughly the size of a G8-2-130. It The company never actually designed anything that would allow for a thrust as great as the 1,600 pounds that Lazar claimed his engine could attain. There was nothing. So there's some contradiction there. And that was a big problem. But even what he put in his car and even his particle accelerator that he said he had in his bedroom, did you know they sold kits for those back then?
No.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's kind of like a model car kind of thing, only on a much, much, much nerdier scale.
They sold metal particle accelerators that you could just build at your house.
My brother actually had a huge chemistry set, which is now completely illegal. But back then, yeah, you
yeah.
could
Buy
buy things
chemistry
like that.
sets online right now. You can get that shit sent
No,
right
no,
to your
no.
house.
With everything in there, you could build bombs. He used to make me clouds and start fires and things. But the stuff
Oh,
like back
fire.
then in the late 70s, early 80s, I mean, especially for Nerdville, you could get shit like this.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But a particle accelerator in
They
your
had
bedroom.
That seems very far fetched.
They
Yeah.
actually had the kits. I mean, not
Well, in the 50s,
actually.
they had a nuclear experimental kit for kids. Came with
Classic.
actual radioactive isotopes and stuff you got to
Yeah.
fool around with. I mean, oh
Glow in
man,
the
what a
dark
time
kits.
to live. Oh,
And did you know in early 1960s, the Scientific America, they published an article on how to make a homemade atom smasher, aka particle accelerator.
get me that article, please.
Yeah, I'd
Oh
like to.
shit. Yeah, I will send it to you guys.
That's
I
interesting.
have it right now. So
I mean, I love hearing all this new information. I mean, this is a wealth of knowledge that you don't read or hear about much, which is really nice about having this group.
So go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's just it. It's just the idea that the things we're bringing to the table here. I mean, it's not a matter of just sitting down and unpacking a quick meal. This is a feast. So I mean, I'm really, I love hearing all this stuff.
so
Okay,
just
so bottom line is the rocket engine that he attached to his car didn't exist.
right.
Okay,
He had
so
an
he got
engine
a
on his he had a rocket engine on his car,
Yeah.
but it wasn't to the magnitude of what he said. So he has a history of embellishment.
Okay, so maybe you just put a turbocharger on it.
To the layperson, aka me, I'm not
Mhm.
scientifically grounded, you people, just so you know. I don't like science or math. I think I'm the only Asian in the history of Asia that can't do math or
on.
like science. But anyway,
Come on.
this would all be like, holy shit, I don't even know what a particle accelerator is, but you're smart. But then if you find out in 1960s, there's a how-to on how to build it from home.
That's nuts.
People who are in physics, who are in this field, who do know, or people who are mechanics back then were like, wait a minute. Yeah, bro, that's impossible. They didn't even have that. So there's that. But then let's say, okay, all that's all fine and well. Well, when he filed for bankruptcy on July 21st, 1986, did you know he did not list under penalty of perjury? He stated his occupation was a photo processor and he was self-employed and he had been so since 1980. That's 6 years. That covers the time that he would have been at Los Alamos.
Now that's interesting. Why was he trying to get around the bank doing something, or was this just completely false?
Yeah, what's the
information?
angle?
Yeah, I don't understand.
So he was in a lot of financial hurt. This man is horrible with absolute money. Absolutely horrible. And Like if you, it's, and just so people know, public record, it's a real thing. He filed for bankruptcy July 21st, 1986, Chapter 7. And in case, some of those curious minds want to know, yeah, of course I have the case number. I'm paralegal. Case number bankruptcy 86-01623 U.S. Federal Bankruptcy Court, Las Vegas. Yeah, he was asked if he had, on the questionnaire as well, have you ever been in partnership or engaged in any other business in preceding 6 years? He answered no. So it could have been that, yeah, he was also contracting with Kirk Meyer for Los Alamos National Laboratory as a photo processor. He also stated in these same proceedings that he received no other income from any other sources and had not filed taxes for the period. So, and this is public record, folks, public record.
Well, I mean, if you hadn't filed taxes for it and then you did actually receive income, of course you're not going to, state that to the bank.
Sure.
Right. But let's talk about that W-2 that he claimed. Because to date, the only thing he's ever been able to say to substantiate his employment was a W-2 stub and his badge. But if you look
Right.
at that W-2 stub, it says United States Department of Naval Intelligence.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of weird because they haven't used United States Department of Naval Intelligence since World War II. It's been the Department
That
of
we
Naval
know
Intelligence.
Right. I was just going to say that we know of. This is a great way to cover your tracks if you want.
And actually, if anything, then why wouldn't it be Office of Management and Budget, OMB?
This is probably a black project.
If you're going to put on there United States Department of Naval Intelligence and it doesn't exist and they've got an EIN number, I don't think so. It will track to something else.
They got an EIN on that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you wanted to be so secretive and not have a paper trail and for a black project and everything, why wouldn't you just pay in cash anyways?
Or why don't you just use a shell company instead of something where he's claiming, look, I worked for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
The DNI, dude. If you were
What if
going
this is
to,
a company
if it
owned-
was going to cover anything, then he should have just used what it was actually called at the time, the Department of Naval Intelligence.
What if this is, actually coming from a parallel universe and we just don't know?
And then his badge, like this guy, even on his ID badge, he wrote Robert Lazar, U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence, but it should have been issued by Wackenhut, who did the
Wackenhut.
I knew it as soon as I said that. I
Yep.
knew something, and then he later admitted that the ID badge from the security company Wackenhut, Bob Lazar later admitted that his ID badge was just a replica.
Oh my God. I didn't even hear about that. That's news.
I made a replica of my actual ID badge.
Right.
What?
So his bankruptcy proceedings, his W-2, his and that K/M next to his name at Los Alamos, I think he was there. I think he worked there. I do not believe he was a physicist. I think that he told the reporter he was a physicist there because, again, maybe he suffers from delusions of grandeur, but I don't believe that he was.
I remember when the original story broke in '89, I remember catching it live that night. I think it was on like a current affair or something. I'm not sure what the program was, but everything just came forward. All of a sudden, there's this guy. He's talking about working out there at Area 51, blowing the lid off of everything, and it was amazing. I mean, there were several things that spun out of that. There was a Project Red Light video that was being distributed, and a bunch of other things. But first Bob was, he's really reluctant about all this stuff. That's what I found so interesting is the fact that although he talked about it, he was literally scared to death when it came down to the wire of actually owning up to what was going on out there. George Knapp kind of pushed him over the line.
It almost seems like he's still scared to death of it.
Yeah.
I'm not buying it. I think it's an act.
What does he got to gain?
He gained a lot. He was in he was in a lot of financial trouble at the time that he came out with this stuff, and not too long after that original, when he was doing it under the guise of Dennis,
Mhm.
then all of a sudden, no problem. Let me go public with my face and everything.
I don't know. I've
I,
seen a
I'm
lot of stuff.
I mean,
I,
this is why I
I'm
think
on the
this.
fence about him. Now, me personally, I think Bob Lazar. I don't think he actually worked in Area 51. Now, what I would say is that I think he may have an inside source that's feeding him stuff, and that inside source doesn't want to take the risk of getting caught.
Well, that's a whole new web right there.
Yeah, it's a whole nother what if that we could
Yeah.
go down forever.
But Paul,
But
I'm
my
in. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
my biggest thing is like you said, he was in such financial distress. I had to go through getting a background check done to get my secret clearance,
Yeah.
and they check pretty hard into your financial statements and everything. They don't want anyone who has a lot of leverage against them to get any sort of clearance, because if you're hurting for money, that's just one more way to get at you to spill the beans on what you know.
And
Sure.
I think that's a whole. We can get into that, but Paul, I wanted, and we're definitely going to, because I got a lot of info on that too, Joe. It's just, Paul, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say and your perspective versus Joe's versus Evan's versus mine, because, maybe I'm missing something. I'm not coming into this biased. I'm just saying at
Sure.
this moment, at the start of this, I am not believing his story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I stood in his shoes and I was, taken into any kind of program like this, knowing that if this is such a high clearance job that literally, I mean, you could just disappear, you could just be, killed, and that's the end of it. I think there's several reasons why he came forward. I think one of them was he was scared to death that he was going to get killed. I mean, it's a lot. That's a big driving force. Now, money's one thing, but I mean, think about what you're doing here. You're wanting to come forward for the sake of money to say we've got alien technology. Where's this money going to come from? Are you going to threaten the United States military and suddenly you get paid? Where's this financial windfall going to come from? I mean, how does this work? The guy
Well,
has a basic understanding, and he worked with with a buddy out there, not a buddy, but a guy he was teamed up with. And reading the book that he had that came out here recently, Dreamland, was pretty interesting. He has a lot of regrets. I mean, for a guy who could scream out all this stuff and raise all kinds of holy hell in the UFO community and stuff, and go out there and tour and do all these different appearances and stuff, shit, he didn't do any of it, which is kind of interesting for a man who wanted money, right?
well, it's not just that. I think he's kind of like a David Roundtree, in my opinion. And for those that don't know, David Roundtree is a disgraced person in the paranormal community who claimed a whole bunch of stuff, and that he was into like quantum this or that. He landed himself on a paranormal show on Destination America with, what was it, John Tenney and that dude from Fast and Furious. Wrote some books and everything, invited to lectures, and then he got busted for not only stolen valor, fake credentials. Then it came out that there was plagiarism, and he just wanted the attention. And
Yeah.
now he's an alleged archaeologist, and which is, we're not even going to talk about that bullshit. But
Yeah.
anyway, I see kind of Bob Lazar as being the same. Okay, let's say that he wasn't looking for all of this money. Maybe he
Hmm.
wanted that attention.
Well,
But
Because
here's
it's clear he doesn't want the attention.
Right.
bullshit,
He's
because
avoiding
he
it.
was in he before this, he was already in the newspaper twice before. There's one of him on a bicycle, and he gave an interview to a paper, and then not too long after that it was about his car, and then he lied about some of the specs on that. um so I mean, if we go to the beginning, we got to look at this dude. Who is Bob Lazar? And to me, like, he contradicts himself just on his education alone. That to me is suspect.
Elaborate, please.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you watch and you listen to him talk about his education, he'll say, well, for example, MIT. Oh, I think I might have gotten my master's around this time. Maybe, I guess it would be 82, 83, or, he talks like that. Well, I have my master's and I can tell you exactly when I got my master's, both of them. And you don't forget that. So when you're talking about his education, his claims are that he went, and I took notes on this, so just give me 1 second. First,
Sure.
he said, oh, well, shit on me, Joe. No, I don't mean for you to really shit on me.
Oh.
Okay. So in he graduated high school in 1976, which was verified in New York, but he graduated in August of 1976. And that's because he didn't have enough credits to graduate, so he had to do summer school. He graduated 261 out of 369 students. So he was in the bottom 10%. Bottom 10%
Of high school.
out of high school.
Okay,
Sure.
that doesn't mean much, but
No,
carry.
it does. When you're applying, when you're saying you went to MIT and Caltech, it does. It absolutely does. So then he said in 1978, he went to Pierce College. Pierce College is a junior college. All right. But there were no records of him completing an associate's degree or transfers. It only has records of him taking a few classes there. Then he said, okay, in a later interview, he said in 1978, he got a Bachelor of Science degree in physics and electronic technology from Pacifica University. Now, I saw a lot of places that were stating Pacifica University does not exist, all this other stuff like that. That's actually not true. Pacifica University did exist. So he claimed to have 2 bachelors from there. It did exist, but it was shut down here in California, because I'm in California, so it's not hard to get public records. I'm just saying, shut down in 1978 because it was a bullshit college that sold degrees. Okay, so then
That's interesting.
Yeah. So then he said he went to Cal State Northridge, 1977 or 1978, right? Okay, so Cal State Northridge is a California State University. You have to apply to get in, and you have to have a minimum, you have to have a decent GPA to be able to get in. They require transcripts, the application process. This has not changed at all. This is even back in the 70s, right? Well, he claimed that he went there for just a short time, just to take a few classes. You can't do that at Cal State, in the Cal State systems out here, nor could you back in the 70s. I know, I asked. So let's look at his timeline just from high school till now. If he graduated in August of 1976, then went to Pierce College, then applied and got into Northridge, that timeline's not matching up, because you can't go to Northridge in admit in the summer. He would have to start the whole application process.
No, he just got some waivers on those.
We'll skip through that. I mean, honestly, if he graduated in 1978 with 2 degrees in physics and electronic technology, which, by the way, is not anybody in the electronics field would know, you don't call it electronic technology, but we're not even going to go there. He wouldn't have had enough time to obtain enough credits to graduate with a Bachelor of Science, not in 1 year. You can only take a max of maybe 4 or 5 classes at a time. That has not changed. There are GEs, general education requirements, that you'd have to take, not to mention your core classes in your major. I know, I have bachelor degrees. It's not easy. It
No,
takes
he just got some waivers on those, you know?
in the bottom 10% of his class. Right. So then he claimed to have obtained his master's from MIT. Again, there were no records found of him at MIT. Plus, to have a master's at MIT, you have to have a thesis. There's no written thesis anywhere, no published thesis anywhere. And back then, they did do the hard publishing. It had to have been sent out for review before you defend your thesis before a board. And not to mention, he stated that one of his professors was like a Dr. Holsfield. There is no Holsfield, nor was there ever a Dr. Holsfield at MIT, but there was a Frederick Holsfield, who was a vocational teacher at his high school, who taught electronics. Red flag there. Let's go to, then he said he got a master's at Caltech. First off, neither Caltech nor MIT offer degrees in electronic technology or just electronics. I'm just throwing that out there. He never would have gotten into Caltech or MIT from a correspondence university such as Pacifica University without full transcripts. From the bottom 10% of his class, he never would have made the cut because they look at all your transcripts. You can't, if he dropped out of Northridge, that would automatically eliminate him. So he can't produce any evidence of himself. No diploma. I have my diplomas. I'm not going to lose those. No transcripts. I have my hard copies. Back even before this whole, you could just digitally get them. I have my original printouts. He has no records of coursework, no books, no library card, no ID card. He's not in commencements. He's not in any yearbooks, no photos. For example, at the Big T at Caltech, he's nowhere mentioned from 1977 through 1982. He couldn't recall the name of one classmate or one professor. He did state, however, one of his professors at Caltech was William Duxler. But William Duxler was actually a professor at Pierce College. There is, nor was there ever, a William Duxler at Caltech. So to me, and then let's look at the public record. So he got married back in 1980. And on his marriage certificate, which is public record number, and I've got his marriage certificate license number, it's number 1980-0-025327. He listed his highest grade level as just 12. When you look at the MIT degree list from 1979 to 1989, he's nowhere listed. So on his license and in his bankruptcy proceedings, he listed his addresses. Los Alamos and California. He'd never listed MIT. He was never in Massachusetts. Can one of you guys please tell me, how can you earn a master's degree from MIT in which you would have to be in person in residency and live in California at the same exact time?
I don't know, Mel. I mean, like, I don't remember when I graduated college.
No way.
Correspondence for next to associates.
So do you see what I'm saying with, like, it's very Roundtree-esque?
Oh, there's a lot of big plot holes in his story. There's no doubt about that.
So anytime you ask him, like in multiple interviews that I saw of him, when they asked him, well, when did you graduate here? When did you graduate there? He would say, oh, around this time, or I think it was, if you wrote a thesis like I did, it's not an easy feat. You know exactly when you graduate. I can tell you the exact years I was at UCLA. I can tell you the exact years I was at APSU. Okay. When I graduated, I can tell you 6 different professors. I still have my leftover commencement tickets. This was back in the early 90s, granted. I have my original transcripts. I have my diplomas all hanging on my walls. I still have my ID card. from back in 1992, for example. So these aren't things that you forget. These are monumental moments in a person's life.
I agree. I have a problem with that too, and I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what the deal is with his credentials, but I don't know.
That you wouldn't forget, that you wouldn't be, I think it was around this time. I can
I
ask
don't know,
people who
Mel.
are
I mean,
fit.
like,
Go ahead.
I don't remember when I graduated college.
You didn't graduate college.
Yes, I did. I got 2 associates,
Mhm.
but I don't give a rat's keister about college.
If you're claiming to be a physicist, and as a physicist, your credentials are absolutely everything, it's a big difference. If you went on and earned your master's,
So
Joe, you would know.
But
I'd
it's also
probably
been,
forget.
like 50 years since he's.
You don't forget things like that. You mean to tell me this man has absolutely no record himself?
I'm sure that's that doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense. Like, where's the diploma that they sent
yeah.
you that you took
well, I
home?
mean,
Like,
He
where's
couldn't
any of
tell,
that?
he doesn't
I,
know one friend. How the hell can you be in Massachusetts and California at the same time? If he did earn his master's, and just so you know, a master's is not earned in 1 year. If you do the master's by examination, um, you still have to do almost 2 years, and then you have to sit for it. So a thesis, when you write a thesis, you have your advisor, your thesis advisor, and then you know who your board's going to be because you have to defend the thesis. That's the thing. You don't just write a thesis, you have to defend it. I know I was stressed all kinds of out, like you would not believe. He
Mhm.
could not list any professors, not one classmate, not one class number, nothing. Couldn't list the buildings. How do you not know the
Okay.
buildings of your college where you earned your masters? When you're working your masters, that's your life. You guys remember what I was like when I was earning the military history masters. Sorry, you guys know what I'm like when I start digging because
I
I
know, I know.
was I was an absolute Lazar believer, but I have a
Mhm.
problem when people fake their credentials, especially when the you're claiming to be a scientist. It's kind of
I
scary.
agree. I have a problem with that too, and I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what the deal is with his credentials, but I don't know. So
Okay, so
to
moving on from the
yeah
safe
to
place that is bureaucracy for Melanie. Um,
Yeah, let's reel it in a little bit, and we've covered what the fallacies and the stretching of the truth that has been going on in Bob Lazar's story.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about how the fuck did he know all of the stuff that he knew, and where did he get this information from that
Right.
all
see,
came to light and came out to be true?
Did it
see,
come to be true?
A lot of it did.
Such
yeah,
as, such as.
Well, he got busted for bringing friends out for the overflights. He said where they were doing testing on recovered craft. So I don't know what about that.
Oh, there's a whole shit ton about that, Paul. But I won't
Okay.
go down that road lest people think that, oh, yeah, he'd been out there at that time. And what was that? That was, what was the name of that place?
Fuck, I can't remember.
Was it Tickaboo Ridge or something like that?
You
It's like
guys have to
16 miles outside of damn Area
okay.
51 or
Groom
something.
Lake. Wasn't it Groom
Yeah.
Lake?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
It was the edge of Groom Lake. It was still the legal portion before they extended it.
So recently, um, the whole point over at Groom Lake, people didn't know, was that the primary mission was to the testing over there was to like work with radar measures and countermeasures. Um, and in the 80s and 90s, they they did a lot of testing in the area. However, they weren't crafts. They were plasmas that were generated by operation of a high-powered proton accelerator dumping its beam into the atmosphere. And Bob Lazar was aware of this. He knew what they were. It wasn't a secret, because it had been going on there for a long time. In fact, his ex-wife's father worked at Los Alamos. So the people in that area, it was basically plasma. And that research had come out for a while now. It's been out that there were no sightings then.
So plasma is what he saw.
There got, in fact, yeah, they were particle beams. But he wasn't
According to
even
whom? Real quick. According to
and the-
whom?
Right.
and keep in mind, he was 90 miles away
Mm-hmm.
from where this stuff was seen. 90 miles away. So what they saw was pretty damn far and was just like a glow in the sky.
Yeah.
That's not the way I remember.
What do you remember, Paul?
Well, they were
You
just talking
holding
about the
back.
way the maneuverabilities of whatever was flying around there, the patterns of movement and such. And if you're using plasma, that's interesting. I'm kind of curious what the plasma. I mean, was it cast against something floating in the air? Was it exactly how does that process work?
Yeah, I would need more information on that to buy that there was a particle beams going through the sky, and that's what they were looking
Beams,
at. That
yeah.
'cause that
I got
doesn't-
this information from a nuclear physicist, as well as a person who has a master's in physics who was from the area and did work in the area. So I will share that with you guys later.
Cool.
But these are real scientists.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I mean you're talking outside of anything I understand as far as when you get into plasma and stuff.
All right, so say that one's a little easier for me to write off, saying, okay, maybe he just knew about some shit, or he had already been out there previously and seen something happen in the sky, and he was like, hey, let me show my buddies this and claim it's a bunch of aliens, and I'm working with them and all this kind of nonsense. But what about some of the other things like Element 115, like the location of S4 within Area 51, things like that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's hit Element 115.
Yeah.
Now, Element 115 wasn't publicly discovered until 2003.
Right.
Basically, what they did to actually be able to synthesize this was they had to go and take, what was it? They basically were smashing two different elements, calcium and something else. Where'd it go?
Didn't it have like a very short half-life or something like that? It didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
only at
decays
like a
very
second or
quickly.
0.006.
Yeah.
In that particular isotope that they have successfully synthesized. Now there
But that
can
may
be
not-
numerous infinite amounts of isotopes of elements out
Yes.
there. So it's hard to tell, what exactly Bob Lazar was working with allegedly and what was being synthesized here on Earth,
Exactly.
But want to know what I found out?
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah, let's hear it. I do want to know.
Okay, so Lazar's, his main claim that Element 115 was that it was stable. That was his main
Within
argument.
the craft, yes.
Yeah.
It was a stable isotope of Element 115 within the craft.
Okay.
That's what made it fly.
Yeah, that
very
whole
difficult to
concept
process.
of it being like this island of stability is actually really old, because I found a 1969 article from Scientific America had like this neato like 3D graph that showed an island of stability around 114. And then there's another article entitled Creating Super Heavy Elements by Armbruster and Musenberg, published in Scientific America again. And it talked about a potential island of stability around 114. You want to know when that was published? All right, I'll tell you. May of 1989. The same month, Lazar began his interviews with that KLAS TV. In fact, Lazar started his interviews after it was published. But, what do I know? Where did he get that idea? Maybe Scientific America?
But
it wasn't a
different
stretch.
Just because Element 114 is stable or has an element of stability to it doesn't mean 115 is going to be stable.
But
You're talking. They
ahead.
had to artificially create these things.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
So was this a hypothesis or a theory?
What?
the island of stability.
No, it was a thing.
Yeah.
Like somebody actually observed this and recorded it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they have 3 or 4 different articles about it.
Okay, but
it's actually an old concept. Yeah, it's an old concept that came from the 60s. And as far as his claims about it and how it pushed back and all the stuff like that, and element 115 now is called the Moscovian element, because the people in Moscow, they don't want to give Lazar credit for whatever he came up with.
Yeah.
Fucking Russians. But he apparently the half-life is so small, short.
Mhm.
Yes.
You would need an absolute shit ton.
Right.
Well,
in order, just to, in theory, to make it work. But then every major physicist, to quote, like even Dr. David L. Morgan, who had really nothing, and Stanton Friedman, a nuclear physicist, who
here's
also
the hole in
critiqued
your
it.
story, though, is here on Earth, our level of technology can only create a element 115 with a very short half-life. There are different types of isotopes of different elements, and each isotope has different half-lives.
Different
Mhm.
levels of stability and all that.
Now, he's talking about element 115 landed here, crashed here on an alien spacecraft. These aliens could have or are going to have a much higher level of sophisticated technology than what we have. So they very well could have figured out how to create a different isotope that is element 115 that could do this.
I could see that. I can see that. Okay, if it is something from another planet, that it would defy anything that we understand. And I will be full disclosure. This stuff about element 115, I do not have a degree in physics, science, nuclear physics, whatever. I was not one of those people. I'm getting my information just from the critiques of his science by other scientists, other physicists, nuclear physicists. So I would take their credentials over anything that I know, and quite honestly, over him, because if he's going to lie about his education, how am I going to know? Why should I trust him over people who are actually published? That's another thing. He's not published anywhere. Even if it wasn't about 115, I'm talking about science or engineering or anything else like that. He's never been published.
Something that I think hasn't been said yet, but I found pretty interesting about all this is we're talking about a man who claims he's working on reversed alien technology. But the one thing you never hear him say is, I saw aliens out there.
Well, didn't he originally say when he was walking through?
He saw 2 short guys with their backs turned to him. He didn't get a good look at them through a little tiny sliver window.
Right.
Blah, blah, blibbity bloop. He's not saying they were aliens, but he's saying that they're 3 foot, 4 foot tall.
Yeah.
So it's either aliens or midget scientists.
I think they believe. I think they prefer the term "little person scientist," Joe.
Little aliens.
It's the wrong nomenclature, Joe.
I mean, for fuck's sake.
Bad.
Yeah, we all want to
the
be
lollipop
for
scientist.
fuck's sake.
This guy has me like. I guess I'm so irritated at Bob Lazar. I want to punch him in his big giant nerd glasses.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying that he doesn't know his stuff. There are a lot of people out there who don't have degrees, who are brilliant as fuck. And they can do work here or they can work there. But when you're making claims like this, and you're doing the lecture circuits, you're publishing books, you're selling this stuff on your bunk ass website, then, don't start it out with a lie and then not clarify it. And then, because then I have to doubt everything else. And then when I'm looking and I'm doing research to say, okay, wait, there's got to be a record. So I want to believe you. I want
Right.
to believe you, Bob.
See,
Bob.
this is why I think he never worked at Area 51, but he does know someone on the inside that gave him a lot of this information about stuff. Because
If
I mean,
it's
he
all
can't.
true, then that would make more sense.
It would
Yeah.
make a hell of a lot more sense. Plus,
But
I mean,
go ahead.
oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Well, he said he worked with a dude named Barry.
Mhm.
Bob, does Barry have a last name? Because you already outed him. It's not like Barry's popular, you know?
Not very popular, no.
So, I mean, and he was pretty adamant about that. So
I think he
Yeah,
did
but-
mention his last name in that Joe Rogan podcast, but I don't recall what it was.
I want to say in the book he never did. I want to say he just said
yeah, I
they
read his
were,
book.
you know, they didn't actually proceed enough to share full names. So I don't know.
So if my house and my life is being erased by the government
Mhm.
and I'm being raided by the FBI,
Mhm.
I don't give two shits and a giggle who my friend is that gave me the information. I'm not going to cover for him. If they were willing to ruin my life and bury me and my family and blah, 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 blah. Why would he cover for that person? If he knew somebody who gave him this information, you know, nerdy old Bob would probably sing like a canary.
I think Bob's just a stand-up guy, and he just didn't want to let him know.
You're
I'm just
killing me,
kidding.
Smalls. You are absolutely
I'm just
killing me.
kidding. No, seriously, I you know, there's so much that I've heard tonight that's really, eye-opening about a lot of things. It does kind of set me on the fence, and I struggle with my own thoughts about everything since I saw it from the very beginning. But there's a lot of things that I don't hear enough talk about that I heard tonight that really make you wonder. I mean, when it comes to, you know, giving your testimony about anything, when you destroy the basic pillars of your information by lying at the beginning, that makes it very, very hard for you to sound legitimate, even if you made up stories about your background. But the stuff that you claim actually did happen, the weight of that actual testimony dissolves and becomes more difficult to hold up. So
Right. Not to
Absolutely.
mention, hey, you guys, let's not overlook his one redeeming quality. Because
Yeah, those
Bob
glasses.
Lazar was a fucking pimp.
he was.
He did
was
get in
an-
trouble with a brothel, didn't he, or something
He
like that?
Yes.
owned a brothel
Yeah.
and he got charged with pandering.
Yeah,
and
Area
so he got
69,
put
I
on
think.
6 months probation because not only did he own a brothel before with his first ex-wife, then even afterwards, he wasn't done with the business. He then
It's hard to
met
get out of.
he met another woman and he wanted her to set up a brothel and her turn the tricks and he would take 50 cents or 50%. You know what that is? Pimp status right there. Bob
Homie
Lazar
beat
is
pimp.
low-key pimp.
So
How
So-
else are you supposed to fund a particle accelerator? I mean, seriously.
exactly.
Make Tracy
Nickel
turn tricks.
accelerator.
That's what he did. When I found that out, I was like, this nerd, man. He is, all I could think of is, what was that one movie with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell? And shit, I'm sure our listener knows what I'm talking about. They're
Yeah,
both
the
cops.
good guys.
The good guys.
The other guys.
We know. All right, listen up.
And at one point, you know, when Will Ferrell was in college, he was a pimp called Gator.
Oh my God, you were a pimp. What? God, no. No, I was just trying to help a friend. We started making a lot of money.
But he didn't realize he was a pimp. Bob.
Gator don't take no shit.
Yeah, Gator don't take no shit.
There is a darkness inside of me. It wants to get out, wants to walk around. It wants some walking around money, and it wants to buy some shoes, and it wants to walk up with the people and say, hey, Gator don't play no shit. You feel me? Gator never been about that. Never been about playing no shit.
Bob was a pimp. He knew he was pimping. Pimping ain't easy. I was just like, okay, you got some street cred there, because not only did you get in trouble for it one time, that wasn't good enough. Now you tried to turn someone else out.
So do you think that all of this crazy nonsense story of his was the most elaborate ruse of all time to cover up his pimping affair for his wife?
No. Okay, so no. His first wife, sadly, I feel really bad because she committed suicide. But of course, they weren't even divorced, and he married another person too in Las Vegas. So he was a pimp and a polygamist. What, Bob? So anyway, I don't think it was
Right
for
on.
that. When you look at his bankruptcy proceedings, that's where I got most of my information from, where to start digging and what was off. He owed a lot of money. A lot of money. He was in financial ruins when he filed for Chapter 7. And then, after all of that, supposedly he worked for S4, and then he came out with all of this stuff. So I think it's a couple of things. One, I think he wants to be someone important, very Roundtree-esque. He wants to be, oh my gosh, I'm the shit and I've got this information.
While at the same time telling people not to contact him about it and trying to act like he's, doesn't want anything to do with it.
But he still did interviews.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
then you got
Now,
George
here's-
Knapp, who's a world-class reporter who can't seem to find the shit you found.
Exactly.
I have a question though.
Yep.
After he came out in '89, did his life get any better?
No,
Say again, Paul?
his life didn't get better. If anything, he was like he didn't want to get hounded by everybody. And I don't know if that's because he lied or what.
Yeah, I think he wanted it to get better. I don't think he really thought through the repercussions.
Okay.
Just like people who commit stolen valor, they want to seem grandiose, but they don't realize if you get caught, the shit's for real.
Let me clarify. Did he get in a better situation financially at all? Did he get in a better situation with the law at all? Like, did certain things go away?
Well, the Daily Variety on June 11th, 1993, Daily Variety, which, if people don't know, it's like an entertainment industry newspaper. So this is just what, 4 years after his claims, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
They reported that New Line Cinema nabbed a pic based on a government UFO scientist. The life story of former U.S. government scientist Bob Lazar, that was recently put in a turnaround by Gruber Peters Productions, has been put on an earthly fast track by New Line Cinema. They finalized the deal for an untitled film on Wednesday after Lazar considered competing offers. Lazar considered competing offers from producers Steve Tisch, Simpson Bruckheimer Productions, and actor Steven Seagal. The picture will have an
God.
estimated $8 million to $10 million budget and will shoot in the fall for early release in '94. So yeah,
So to get paid?
he was in production talks until a lot of this shit started coming around. Because keep in mind, he then filed for bankruptcy and got busted. Pimping ain't easy. Pimping ain't easy.
Yeah, but I mean, you could be in production deals and never get a dime. I mean, for me,
But he
I'd have to
doesn't
have
know that.
money.
Paul, you and I have been around enough where we've been, well, that came out really wrong. I was going to say, well, we've been offered money, but,
Pimpin'
this
ain't
is back
easy.
then. He probably didn't know. He was
Yeah.
probably hoping to get out of financial problems. He was probably hoping to be someone important and didn't realize, well, it's not quite working out how you thought, did it?
Yeah, as of right now, on the just a quick Google search will tell you that his net worth is like $500,000.
It's more than mine. And I got real
Absolutely,
degree,
yeah.
and I've got real degrees, so I'm a little pissed about this.
It also says that his occupation is conspiracy theorist. Just thought I should put that out there.
Well, shit. But Joe and I actually had a conversation about this, and Evan, you brought this up too, I believe. He filed bankruptcy in '86, but he's claiming he had a top secret security clearance, right?
And a job working for the Department of Naval Intelligence at a top secret, government facility, and you're not making good money doing that, or like what?
right?
Well,
But
just because
Joe,
you make good money doesn't mean you're not just pissing it away. One of the things he bought was a Corvette. I mean,
yeah,
if you're hurting for money, you don't go buy a Corvette
And
right.
an
But-
at-home particle accelerator.
or throw a frickin' rocket engine on your Prius. But
But
anyways,
that's not where I was going. I was going was how could he have gotten a top secret security clearance in
beyond top secret.
yeah, he claimed there was a secret Q. Never heard of that, but or
Q
38
clearance.
levels above Q, if I quote him. Maybe we're not Q-esque, but I know in the military for me to get my secret clearance, it took a long time. For TSSCI, which is a top secret sensitive compartmented information, I believe that's what the SCI stands for, which is like that high level. It takes at least a year. Your bankruptcy would bar you from being able to get your security clearance because you would be considered at risk for potential to commit espionage.
Well, if you're
Yep.
hurting that bad for money, even before you go and get your bankruptcy, they're going to look at how bad you're leveraged. I mean, it's not just going for security clearance. When I was trying to get the job with the sheriff's department, one of the things they did was look at my finances.
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
says if whether or not you're a potential risk. And so
Right.
he wouldn't have gotten that. But then he takes it a step further and says, hey, he applied for this. And while he was waiting for his clearance to go through, they gave him like 121 secret documents in which they described this and this, and he's reading it. But you ain't got secret clearance yet, bruh. They're not going to give you sensitive material until you can clear. But then he says,
Unless.
yeah, and then he says, 8 days later, he was flown to S4 to begin his jobs. You're not going to get a TSSCI or a Q level, 38 levels above TSSCI in 8 days. That's not how it works.
According to the almighty internet, Q clearance is an actual thing with the U.S. Department of Energy and with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It is the highest level of security clearance you can get.
In the naval, what is it? Naval SI or whatever. Yeah.
So it is the absolute highest you can get.
That's what it says. Yes, where you are privy to permitting access to secret information, documents, things like that.
magic
So
level.
I definitely know then. That's not something you're going to get in 8 days.
I highly fucking doubt it. Probably maybe more like 8 years.
I know it sounds really stupid, but let me play devil's advocate and say, what if they gave him these documents just to test his ability to reason and be able to keep secrets, and it was
Well,
all
then-
bullshit?
They really fucked up in giving him his Q clearance in 8 days because he sung like a canary now, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
What a shit
6
kicker,
months on the job, I'm bringing friends out to look at aliens.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little
And then he
problem there.
became a pimp.
Then started pimping.
I still think that he had a friend on the inside or someone he knew on the inside that wanted to leak this information out to the general public. I mean, it's
I think-
the only thing that makes sense. Or the only other thing that may make sense is
He's
that
full of shit.
Right?
in 89, the Cold War, it's starting to wind down. I mean, it's well past its peak. If the government's finally starting to consider, well, are we going to open up to the general public about aliens or whatnot? How are we going to go about doing that? Can we get someone to go and release a bombshell like this that's not credible whatsoever? That way people are going to sit there and weigh the pros and cons and really going to dive into this. Is this guy full of shit? Is it not? And they're going to get talking about aliens. And then they can just start building it up to the point that we are now. and the government's finally starting to release stuff.
Wait,
Just seems
what?
way too elaborate.
Yeah, that's
man.
way out
Like-
there. I mean, that's more elaborate than like, I don't know. That's pretty extensive. I mean, and
Yeah.
but I think the
However, I
guys,
wouldn't put it past the government to do some crazy shit like that. I don't.
yeah,
I
right.
mean, like,
But I would say, because this is a guy who's gone on and on and on and on about this, I think this dude is full of more shit than an outhouse because he wants to be important. I think he wants to be, for even though he said he didn't want to be famous, he didn't want the attention. Like a week later, or not too much longer after he go ahead and started doing interviews without the blackouts. Maybe he was initially afraid. Yeah, I would be too. Did you guys see the glasses on him when he first came out? So yeah, he wasn't sure how he was going to be received, but he's already had a dose of quote unquote fame when he was published in the newspaper about his bicycle and then his car and then his hobbies. And he was in failed financial ruins. So, I mean, let me get famouser. Is that a word? Whatever. And then, they're doing this documentary about him. There's books written. He's doing the circuits. Is there something? Maybe. And maybe he just jumped on that bandwagon. Oh, there's not much known about ufology, and I'm sure it wasn't even called then. This is really cool. I'll just say this. I think he knows enough to make him sound brilliant to people like me, dumb fucks in science. But I think to real scientists and real nuclear physicists, and that's probably why that community is so pissed off, because so many of people are saying his science does not make sense.
Yeah, a lot of when he discusses, scientific theories and aspects and stuff like that, it's he dances around a lot of subjects in a very odd way. That
Yeah.
a very a long-term scientist and especially a physicist would not really do. They would be able to talk about this much more in a much clearer way.
Yeah.
especially that element 115.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I know
mean,
he
that's a
also.
hang up because like you guys said, it did come out. It was discovered later, but aren't those, when elements are discovered or they're made or whatever, don't they follow numerical order anyway? So eventually wouldn't 115 come out eventually? Because it would be
That's
like
actually
the next
based.
number.
It's not numerical. It's by the
No.
number of protons.
Atoms.
Okay.
Atom. No. It's the protons in the atom.
Is it protons? I knew it was a makeup of the actual makeup of the element itself is what determines where it falls.
Yes,
mean-
but now to piggyback off of that, to this day, there is nobody, even though we have synthesized element 115 in a few different isotopes of it, nobody has been able to successfully make it do the things that Bob Lazar was claiming that it was able to do in the stable isotope that they had it on in Area 51.
Well,
Right.
my only rebuttal to that is, in order for us to try and create artificial gravity utilizing element 115, don't we kind of need to know what gravity actually is in the first place?
Oh, sure. You got the cart before the horse on that one.
I mean, like, you got quantum loop gravity, you got string theory trying to explain what gravity is. We both
Is it a
know,
wave? Is it not a wave? Who the fuck knows?
is it loopy? Is it like, nobody knows what it is, and even like anyone studying string theory or quantum loop gravity, they're going, well, either whichever one's more right than the other, it doesn't matter because it's not the final answer.
Sure.
It's just which one explains gravity better at this point in time with our current level of understanding.
I need to throw something out there real quick before we go too far down this rabbit hole. But one of the other things I found that was pretty interesting, and some of y'all might not be aware of this, but evidently there used to be certain security measures that he described that used to take place whenever he would go in and out of this area 50, 51 or S4 or whatever it was.
About
one of
the
those
digits
things-
measuring machine?
Yes, that measure the bones in your hand and whatnot that you had to put your hands on. And
Yeah.
which was an interesting device. And that finally came out. That does exist, and it is used by the military, from what I gather.
Did you also know that something similar was depicted in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a movie that came
I
out
know.
before his claims?
I actually watched that. I've got props from that movie. I'm a big follower of that movie. Love it. But what device are you talking about?
It's similar to a biometric
It
scanner,
is.
but
Yeah.
That's what it is.
supposedly this thing shot something kind of like X-rays through the hand and measured the lengths of the bones in the fingers,
Yes.
and in order to identify you.
Yeah, and would
I'm
pop your
sure.
key card out of the machine so you could get in the building each day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know what scene you're talking about too, because they were going into one of those little meeting spots to discuss
Yeah.
the coordinates that were in the movie. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that
But
thing.
if that was, I mean, if that operated the same way, if it was something that was actually in use, if it wasn't something created out of the creative levels of what would the military have, maybe that we don't have, that they just kind of suppositioned in there. I don't know. Good question.
Well, he had in 1971, there was this thing called the
Okay.
Identimat, okay, where it was a hand
Sure.
scanner. That was in
Okay.
1971. So it was like the stars, it was the same kind of little roundabout device in Close Encounters,
Hmm.
which came out in 1977. But Bob Lazar
Sure.
had his reveal in 1989. So when you're looking at
Right.
the things like that, it's like, I don't know if he was the first to come out with it.
I just thought it was interesting that they had a connection in that particular moment of his testimony, and not to say that in science fiction films there isn't all kinds of different gadgets like that that exist, but it's just the idea.
Right. I mean, let's be real. In the paranormal community, there are a lot of people who want to be the it. They want to be the
Sure.
one to discover it or to put it on blast. Bob Lazar wasn't the first and he's not going to be the last, I'm sure. But his claims really took off because I think he knew you can't really unprove or prove the UFOs things back in when he was making these claims. Now, when
Right.
you watch that documentary, and I say that in air quotes, he claims, well, the FBI is raiding me the day after he has that talk with Jeremy Corbell about did he take element 115 or something? And
They're probably
so,
looking for his pimping money.
right. No,
Uh, you know.
actually, what people didn't know is a search warrant was issued 2 days before
Mm,
because his business sells and ships thallium, which is an odorless, colorless, tasteless. Um, it'll kill you.
yeah.
And it was used, so it's hard to detect, but somebody was murdered up in Michigan, and it turns out they bought thallium from his company. So 2 days before that raid, um, they issued that search warrant. So it didn't happen all of a sudden like the film made it out. Like he had this conversation with Jeremy Corbell, in which Corbell asked him, "Did you steal element 115 or portions thereof?" It's garbled, and then automatically, oh, guess what? He's being raided. He must be telling the truth.
Un-
Yeah, no,
Creative
unless
editing.
yeah, it was
unless the
very creative
government
editing.
wanted us to think it was all about thallium.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
Oh
That
yeah,
thallium.
yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
Okay, here's my thing. I don't want
Uh-huh.
anybody thinking that I went in to debunk Lazar because
No,
I
you did.
didn't. In the very
You.
beginning, I was like, dude, this guy is going through all of this shit. Maybe these people are trying to just tear him down because that's what skeptics, we're all and I'll admit I'm skeptic about a lot of things, but that's what people do. They don't like a
I
good
think you're
story.
more objective than skeptic.
So I didn't want to approach it that way, but I'm telling you, when I first saw that documentary, I thought this is the shit. Holy
Yeah.
crap. I'm
Yeah.
glad this came out because I have read his stuff and I didn't know too much about him. So
Hmm.
I wanted to find some proof for myself that because obviously, if our listeners can tell now, I'm really good at doing research.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was what I do. But the more I started to find out, and I know where to dig, the more I started getting frustrated and I started writing it down. I mean, this took me about 6 months,
Yeah.
a long ass time where I'm just like, and now I'm pissed because I'm like, Pimp Daddy Bob freaking you tried to bamboozle me. And I don't like that. I get really angry.
Well, when you're a pimp, when they say it helps to have somebody on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So that's what I'm telling,
Oh,
Bob,
I love it
Bob,
when they're on the
Bob,
inside.
stop with the
uh,
UFOs, Bob. Just stick to pimping. Stick to
yeah.
pimping. You got your connections. I
Yeah.
just can't. I can't. Just
Companies
cannot.
and stuff.
This is
He had
one
to be a
where,
fly pimp.
right, right.
Y-
Gator
what
don't take
gets
no
me,
shit.
I think most of why all this stuff flies is when you look at his mannerisms, his meekness, and his almost inability to not want to share while seemingly giving
Sharing.
breadcrumbs. Yeah, it does. It kind of paints a picture and gives you front-loaded information that may be misleading. And so you think, well, he can't be like that. Why would he be like that? Look at him. He's just a little meek guy. He's nothing.
Right.
But so I don't know. I mean, honestly, I think with all the information I was given tonight, I think there's a whole lot bigger picture that I didn't see, and I kind of it's changed a lot of my opinion.
So for me,
I
Bob,
agree.
you're a real pimp, but you don't have Q level security clearance. You didn't touch a UFO. Yeah, I'm not buying it. So yeah, you can buddy up with David Roundtree for all I care. That's me.
I
Evan?
don't know.
I'm in the same boat. At first I was compelled by his story and I was interested because it's very interesting, especially like Paul was saying, coming from a guy who seems like he doesn't want to talk about it and doesn't want to, but that I don't know, could all just be an act. But I think with
Yeah.
all the plot holes in this story and all of the lies that have been brought to light, I can't say I'm on board with it at all.
Joe?
I don't know. Personally, I think he's full of crap. But at the same time, there are certain things um, that turned out to be true that he talked about that there really wasn't much of a way for him to know about unless he had a guy on the inside feeding him this information. That's where I'm sticking on this. He knows some of this stuff, but that's why he can't go into details and dodges questions and whatnot. He knows of it. He just doesn't know the details. That's why he can't elaborate on anything.
Well, to me, man, if you lied about all of your education and all of your degrees and all of this stuff, you're probably just going to lie about everything else. And I can't trust a word that comes out of your mouth.
There's your pillars.
Just to be honest.
Well, in every great lie, there is a little morsel of truth.
It's true.
It's just
It's a
trying to
lie,
wade
but I
through
believe
all
it.
the bullshit to try and get that little grain. So,
Yeah, maybe. Maybe the truth was he just liked third, Close Encounters with the Third Kind and
Yeah.
wanted to be one of those guys. I don't know, man.
All right, everyone. That is going to conclude episode 6 of MVP's All Things Considered. Tune in next week where we will be discussing the historical and religious mentions of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.